Support for The Art of Sway and all the other shows on the Marketing Podcast Network is provided by Memento. If you have your own podcast, you know producing it is half the battle. Promoting it is the other half. What if you could upload your episode, video or audio, and have AI pull out the best moments to use in social media promotions? You can with Memento. Upload the video or audio, review the recommended clips, click a couple of buttons, customize the colors and fonts, and hit save. Instant Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, Facebook or LinkedIn posts, all with video or audio embedded for dynamic promotions that drive people to the episode. And the AI kicks out show notes, transcripts, and even social media captions. All you do is review and post. Go check it out. MPN listeners can try it for free at bit.ly/MomentoMPN. That's bit.ly, bit.ly/MomentoMPN. Welcome to The Art of Sway, the podcast that uncovers the power of influence and its impact on all areas of our lives. I'm your host, Danielle Wiley. Each week, we'll explore the many facets of influence through candid conversations with industry insiders, from brand marketers to social workers, educators, leaders, and more. Let's dive in. Selene Yeager is a host of Hit Play Not Pause podcast and content manager at Feisty Menopause, as well as a best-selling professional health and fitness writer who lives what she writes as an NASM certified personal trainer, cycling coach, PN1 certified nutrition coach, off-road bike racer, and former All-American Ironman triathlete. Her work includes co-authoring Roar and Next Level with Dr. Stacy Sims. As anyone who spends any time with me personally can attest, I have gotten somewhat obsessed in the past year with the topic of menopause. I listen to every podcast I can find and read every article and book I can get my hands on. That is how I made the delightful discovery of Selene Yeager. She has been a health and fitness writer for years and is now considered one of the foremost experts in the menopause space, especially as it relates to active women. The book Next Level, which she co-wrote with Dr. Stacy Sims, has become my Bible. I literally keep it on my bedside table. I hope I didn't scare her off during this conversation. I was clearly a super fan. Enjoy. Well, hello. Thank you so much for joining me. I reached out to you. I think it was last week. I was like, I'm just going to reach out and see if she'll come. And here you are. So this is awesome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, and I'm not on LinkedIn that much, but I got a notification. So
yeah, I was stalking you on
you.
I was stalking you on all the social media platforms. So I would have found you regardless.
I'm easy to find.
Yeah. So I'm going to share in a little bit how I discovered you and the awesome work that you're doing. But to kind of set the stage, I would love for you to share with our listeners just a little bit about your journey to where you're at now. I know that you've always been a writer, but you've added a whole bunch of other mediums to what you do. Kind of interested in how you got from magazine writing to where you're at today.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some people are just like, oh, I guess you're not much of a writer anymore, which A, is not true. I still write a lot of books, including the ones with Dr. Stacy Sims, who we'll talk about, I'm sure, a little bit later. But, magazines are having some trouble. They've had some trouble. And I really am still a writer at heart. I still create content for Feisty Media, and Feisty Menopause particularly. But I find, especially in the way that I do it, podcasting is still a lot of writing. It's still telling a story. It's still conveying information. And in many ways, it's such a big breath of fresh air for me because I did, as you referenced, I spent 20 years in the magazine industry, writing for Women's Health and Oprah and all the pretty much any of the magazines, you name it, I wrote for them. And I would do often a 45-minute conversation with somebody and they would get 4 lines in a piece, and there was so much information that just would always be on the cutting room floor. It was really frustrating, and in a book, you get a lot, but books are giant missions to create. And sometimes it's like, wow, this is too much. And a podcast is such a great way to get across a lot of ideas with nuance and let the people actually talk and have room. And yeah, I really have been enjoying it.
I love, just this here talking to you. I think my favorite thing about podcasting has been this ability to just reach out to people I discover and think are awesome and invite them to have a conversation. And it's just the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. It's really, really great.
So you've always been writing about fitness and women's health, but this community you've really created and your podcast, it's about really for women of a certain age. Sounds like I'm writing some weird.
It's women going through menopause. They can be any age. We have people in their late 30s.
Yeah.
We do. And I think that's what's important is that, and I didn't mean to cut you off there,
No.
but that is what is important is that, when I have also I've been a writer, but I've also been an athlete for that time. I raced mountain bikes at a semi-professional level, and as a pro license, I just never made a big salary doing it. I've done Ironman, I've gone to Kona, I've done a lot in that journey. And, I raced all into my 40s. And, when I hit that transition pretty hard towards the menopause point in time, I started looking for information for myself, and all the information was geared towards the main population who is largely sedentary. So the information would be like, you should exercise. And I'd be like, I got that. I'm on it.
Yeah.
You should, fuel yourself, like eat nutritious foods. I was like, I've got to be kidding me. And there was nothing about so much I was experiencing. There's the information has been starting to come out hot and heavy now that menopause is really getting into the mainstream. But, people weren't talking about anxiety and fear and all the other things that sort of come up as the hormones change. And I was just like, women start disappearing from starting lines and from activity in the menopause transition, just like girls do in puberty, for all the same reasons. Their bodies are going through this thing and they don't understand and they don't know what to do and they think they're kind of done and they just step out, when there's things that you can do to work with your physiology to make things better. And I'll be very transparent. It was difficult to start that podcast. I was very excited about starting it, and then it was the night before and I was panicked about it. I'm like, do I want to talk about being in menopause? Because there was still so much sort of like odd shame and stigma about it, right? And especially as somebody who is athletic, it's like it implies that you're old. It has all these negative connotations. And I was thinking, well, if not me, who? I have all these contacts. I've been writing in this space forever. And anytime that I'd ever written about menopause, it was just about terrible things like, oh, the menopod. Everybody was just talking about these awful terms. It was all about like fat gain and this, and it wasn't about it didn't encompass the whole woman, and there was nothing positive about it. And I just really wanted to change the conversation and have the conversation.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that really appealed to me about your messages about it, because you're right. Like, you're living your life and you're doing all the things. And I was doing everything right. I exercise a lot. I eat really well. And then all of a sudden, like, you no longer have control over this body and it's doing all these weird things and not doing things, and everything for me at least, everything I was doing for 20 years was suddenly not having the same,
right.
not creating the same response in my body. And what I loved about your messages, which I discovered on Facebook and then found the book Next Level that you wrote with Dr. Sims, is it's really empowering. You talk about like lift heavy shit, right? So it's like, right. So it's not just, do your weightlifting. It's like, no,
right.
like get really heavy weights and push yourself. And like, it's just a very different, and like sprint training, it's a very, very different mindset, and it's very empowering. And when you feel like you're losing control, it's really nice to feel like you can suddenly take control over something and do an activity that feels so empowering and actually does help.
Yeah. Well, thank you, because that was 100% the intent behind all of that. There's science behind it too. It's all evidence and science based too, which is very important to me as well. You're basically just giving your body some help doing some of the things that the hormones used to do just sort of automatically there.
As I was saying before, you've been writing about women's health and about fitness for a while, but obviously this transition and this change in this stage in life seems to have been more inspirational to you in terms of really creating something new. I mean, you created a podcast, you have this community on
Yeah.
Facebook. You've been doing this your whole career, but this feels something different. Like, why, what about this kind of moved you to do to the next level? No pun intended.
Yeah,
It's the name
I
of the
mean, it
book.
really is. Yeah. It really was just that. Like, I felt like nobody was talking about this in this way. And that you're looking, I mean, a woman could easily live 40% of her life, if not half, in this transition and past, right? That is
Yeah.
astronomical. That is a lot of your life. And I knew that there were other women out there like me who wanted to continue to engage in their athletic selves and in their active selves. And I would be lying if I said I knew how big that community would become so quickly, because I didn't. You know, we've got like 22,000 women in that Facebook group now, and we've had more than 2 million downloads of
Wow.
the show, you know, over just a couple of years time. So there's a lot of women out there. That's why it's been so satisfying. It's been really satisfying because I feel like my whole life is built up until this point. I've spent my life writing about all of these issues. I've interviewed hundreds of experts. I have raced, you know, against and with a lot of people who have been on the show who are also in this stage of life, and they were willing to come on the show and also share their experiences. And like when you have somebody like a 7-time world champion adventure racer talking about her experience with muscle loss and her experience with anxiety, and you have, you know, another similarly world champion ultra runner talking about like having hot flashes during a 100-mile race in Leadville, you know, like it's so refreshing. It's so great to just normalize the conversation. And women are just like, this is wonderful. I'm listening to people who are going through this, and it's just really exciting to bring that kind of conversation into the mainstream and have so many people responding to it. It does feel like the most important work I have done.
Well, it's meant a lot to me. And I think it's just so empowering to hear anyone being in the marketing industry. We talk a lot about, especially in influencer marketing, the reason what we do
Mm,
is successful is because people trust someone like themselves, and they find someone who they either aspire to be or they relate to in some way. And then
right.
that person's telling a story and it helps to introduce them to a new service or product. But it doesn't have to be selling something necessarily. Like I think about Peloton, which I use, and Susie
Mm,
Chan, who's one of the running instructors, is
hmm.
48 and will full out talk about her hot flashes. She calls them hot flushes, I think, because she's British and it's very
Yeah,
cute. Um,
British.
but she'll full out just, you know, like, I'm having one now. And like, as she's running, and it's so nice.
So
I mean,
great.
because so many of those, I mean, most of them are, I'm sure, darling, but like, you know, they're 28, they're 29. They don't have the same
They
body
don't know,
concerns
right? They don't,
that I
totally.
do.
They don't. Yeah, and they're not expected to.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just, it's so nice. Like, I think, to your point, like talking to the ultra runner and talking to these serious athletes who are going through this, it gives you help, or gives you hope rather, and just something to identify with. And there just has been like such a lack of information about this
Yeah.
topic
Yeah,
out
there
there.
really, really, really has. And you have estrogen receptors on every single cell of your body. Like everything, people were like, what are you going to talk about? I'm like, I can talk for
Yeah.
years. I've been telling people how to exercise and eat right for 27 years. You know, I can talk for years about this, and science will always be evolving on it. There will always be things to talk
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. Just in terms of like the information that's out there, I was talking to a friend of mine sent a picture yesterday and she had a tank top on, and I was like, oh, you look ripped, you look awesome. And she's like, well, yeah, I'm always in a tank top because I'm hot all the time. I was like, same. And so we just started talking about HRT and information, and she was
Yeah.
nervous, and I said I was nervous too. I actually just started it 2 weeks ago, and I said I've been consuming every single, and I'm not much of like a nonfiction science. Like, it's amazing how much nonfiction I've consumed just because of the changes going on in my body. And I said to her, I said, I think I've listened to like every podcast episode, read every article, read all the, like, I'm just like a sponge trying to find all this information because there has not
Mm-hmm.
been a lot out there. So, and then I think the other piece I want to bring up is just the misinformation that has been out there. And I know you've talked about this a lot. I was listening to your interview. I forget her name, the woman who runs the menopause.
Dr. Stephanie Fabian. Yes. Yes.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. Yeah. So just so much misinformation out there from, I think it was a 2002 study. What do you think needs to be done to kind of, I know there's so many, I'm so impressed with how many people have downloaded the podcast and the huge community that you've built, but there's so many more women out there and there's still so much misinformation and so many doctors who are just dismissing women when they come in and share what they're going through. I mean, my own mom told me to just kind of grin and bear it. Like there's just a lot of misinformation out there. So how do you re-engineer and re-influence women who have been told this wrong story for so many years?
Yeah. You can, you can only take it a step at a time and I can only I take all the steps I can to amplify the right messages, and science, like I said, the science-based and people who I trust, having a background as a science writer. We're never going to, especially with the internet, get rid of misinformation, right? Like that just exists. So you have to trust that women, as menopause comes more into the mainstream and they have more information at their disposal, will be savvy consumers themselves, and it's really all you can do. I get honestly more frustrated with the other part that you talked about, the doctors who are dismissive, and I hear that all the time. And, the generous part of me knows that it's actually not their fault. They aren't trained in it. And that a study that came out in I think it was the British Medical Journal, but I could be wrong. It could be Mayo Clinic. One of them. It was a peer-reviewed, very respectable journal, showed that like 7% of residents, and this was 2019, felt prepared to have any conversation about menopause with their, and that included OBGYN. That it was internal medicine, family practice, and OBGYN. There just hasn't been education for the doctors in this space. So when you leave that big of a vacuum, you're looking for, that's a wide open door.
I was going to say my general practitioner is a woman my age, and we've had some great conversations about this, and she's been wonderful and super open. But we were having this great chat 2 weeks ago, and she said, if I could go back in time to like young doctor me, she said, because I wasn't taught about this, and I was actually taught misinformation, and then I gave that misinformation to my patients. And I think back to some of these conversations and what I ended up like doing to these women early in my career. And she said, I'm just so angry with old me. Support for The Art of Sway and all the other shows in the Marketing Podcast Network is provided by Memento. If you have your own podcast, you know producing it is half the battle. Promoting it is the other half. What if you could upload your episode, video or audio, and have AI pull out the best moments to use in social media promotions? You can with Memento. Upload the video or audio, review the recommended clips, click a couple of buttons, customize the colors and fonts, and hit save. Instant Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, Facebook or LinkedIn posts, all with video or audio embedded for dynamic promotions that drive people to the episode. And the AI kicks out show notes, transcripts, and even social media captions. All you do is review and post. Go check it out. MPN listeners can try it for free at bit.ly/MomentoMPN. That's bit.ly, bit.ly/MomentoMPN.
Well, it's just like the Women's Health Initiative studies, right? Like the studies that just stopped hormone therapy in its tracks. I worry that the pendulum swings again too far in the other direction, that we're like, there's some people who are pushing hormone therapy as almost a fountain of youth, and that's not true either. And there, there's just a middle ground where I wish we could all just tread. Like
Yeah.
that for some people it's amazing, and for some people they don't do as well. And there's a lot of formulations, and it takes some trial and error. And there's lots of ways up this mountain. There's lots of ways through this transition, and the real criminal thing that happened with the Women's Health Initiative, and for people who are native to that or naive to that, there was a giant study back in the early 2000s that they were actually looking if hormone therapy could prevent heart disease and prevent some of these, like dementia, some of these diseases in women that go up after menopause. And they were hopeful that that would be the case. And they stopped the study early. And it was like a moonshot. It was millions of dollars, tons of money went into the study because they were getting more breast cancer. They were getting more heart disease. But there was so much wrong with that study. When you looked at it statistically, it actually wasn't that meaningful. And the average age of the women was like 63. They were starting them. They were way post-menopause. And now, they know that there's this window around menopause where you still have like receptors like we talked about before.
Right.
Like once those receptors start going and you start weaning, your body starts weaning and you put estrogen back in the system, that's problematic, especially for brain health. I mean, they're doing a lot of interesting studies on that. And like once you've developed a certain level of cardiovascular disease, you can increase your risk by taking the hormones on top of it. So it didn't just stop women from taking hormones for a good 20 years, but it also kind of put a cold blanket on research, right? So we could be so much further along in our understanding if we had maybe taken the lesson of that to do more research instead of just like, nope, we're not gonna, this is not it. There's so much bad that came out of that.
Yeah, there's we can share in the blog post of this episode when it goes live. I thought the article that was in the New York Times Magazine a couple of months ago
was excellent.
Was
yeah,
excellent
really
by
excellent.
Susan Dominus. It was easy
So
to
good.
understand.
That was excellent.
It explained. It just kind of explained the whole
very,
timeline
very good.
of what
Very
happened.
good
So
piece.
we'll link to that. So as I was mentioning, I found you through this crazy circuitous route. So I was in this Peloton group.
Hardcore
I
on
was
the
in
floor?
Hardcore on the Floor, which is a Peloton weightlifting group, and it's of all ages. And then a bunch of people who were perimenopause and menopause started posting about this book, Next Level, and going on and on and on about it. And so I ordered the book, and then another group was started for people who were into the suggestions in Next Level. And then I found your group, and then I found your podcast. And that just kind of shows how social media works and how people find things these days, which is great for consumers, but a little bit stressful for the people creating the content. Because how do you find everyone? And so how have you navigated, like, how did you decide on a Facebook group being the thing for you? And then how do you decide where you want to put content out and how to best promote the work that you're doing on social media?
Yeah, I mean, that's an ongoing conversation, right? It's an ongoing thought process, but it is funny, like word of mouth is still word of mouth, right? Like word of mouth is still everything. It's just, especially now because we have these devices and we are all so connected. The word of mouth is more powerful than ever. And it's funny you said that because like there was some Monday that I looked at, like, because you have to ask to be let into the private Hit Play Not Pause group. Yeah. And there was like 540 women. And usually there's, I don't know, 40 over the weekend. I was just like, I'm like, what is happening? So I even put up a post. I'm like, where did y'all come from?
Yeah.
And it was all the hardcore on the floor like that. It was so funny. Yeah. So that stuff is super, super powerful. For all of its ills, Facebook is really good for groups. It's just, there's still not a tool out there that is as efficient.
It's the only reason I'm still on there. I mean, my entire Facebook feed is just my group.
Totally. Yeah, I don't do anything else with it, but man, it is really good for groups. And that group is so supportive, and the conversations are great. And we just wanted to, create this complementary space where people, could come in and help each other, because this is part of being the community, so that has been fantastic. And on, Fridays, we just started implementing, because what ended up happening is that, you have, and a lot of it is well-intentioned, but you have people who are coaches, or they have nutrition companies, whatever. They look at this as an avenue to sort of like market themselves,
Right.
but that can turn sour quick for the group, right? Because it's not the intent. And I kept trying to, like, people would report and I kept deleting, and I'm like, there's got to be a better way because people are looking for this information and people have this information. We just don't want the whole forum to be about that. So on Fridays, I put up a post that says, share your services. Like, if you are a coach, if you are whatever, I'm not going to vet this stuff, buyer beware, but just, here is your little marketplace. And it's been super successful. Like, I know people are not doing it outside of it. It's really taking care of that. So it's cool. It's a cool environment, and as far as like what else I find Instagram is super useful for disseminating the information that we are putting forth in the podcast and in the newsletter, because I can make like a little carousel just hitting the high points and then drive people to the longer form, and that's really useful. We've debated with the TikTok thing, and just still not there. Still not sure that is exactly where our audience is living. There's certainly some doctors who do it quite well. I mean, like, you're always looking at those things, right? Like, is it a YouTube short? But we're meeting people. I think mostly we try to meet people where they are. And that is really where we find that they are.
Yeah. So, but we wanted to ask every guest for this season to share a woman who has inspired them in their career and their life, and just kind of give a shout out and share about a woman who has been an inspiration.
Yeah, that's so hard, because like, in like what part of my life? I mean, I have to thank my mother, because without my mother, there is nothing else possible. My mother helped me with my family so I could race around the world and gather and build myself up. So without that, nothing happens. I just have to thank her. She's made everything that I've done truly possible, like, hands down. Like, when you talk about influence, like, meeting Stacey Sims was definitely one of those pivotal moments, in my life. Dr. Stacey Sims, who you referenced earlier, because, she's a pioneer. She was the first person saying, like, women are not small men in this space. Like, we have different physiology, and all the studies are being done on college age men. They don't study women because their physiology is complicated. So it's such a light bulb moment. I'm like, this is going to change everything. When I met her in 2012, I was like, this changes everything. And it has changed everything.
Was it on your podcast? That most drugs are not tested on women on different gender. What is it? Ambien is the only one.
Yes. I just wanted to burn everything down. And even that one, like, they found out after the fact, like, oh, women are having more adverse reactions because they're processing. Like, even if you really want your head to explode, they even mostly work on male animals, on male mice. And male cell lines. I mean, all of it. Like, when I talk to all these researchers, are like, oh yeah, we need a whole lot of redoing. And it's insane how long it's been.
And so, how did you meet Dr. Sims? Was it through just because you are a fitness writer and she needed a partner?
No, it's funny. I have a bunch of certifications, and one of them is as a cycling coach. So you have to get like continuing education, to keep your certifications. And every 2 years I would go to the USA Cycling Summit, because you could get all of them for the next 2 years. But it was always this old boys club. I would go and it would just be the same guys, that were friends of the same guys saying the same thing. And so I just expected to go and just kind of like check out and just get my CECs. And the man, a friend of mine who I was staying with him and his wife. He's like, I think that you're going to like Dr. Stacey Sims. He knew her work. And he's like, make sure you go to that one. So I went to her session, and she was talking about periods and menstruation and how it affected hydration and like all this stuff. I've never heard anybody at a coaching summit talking about women's menstrual cycles. And when she was done and walked out the door, it was like, People, there was a line following her like she was the Messiah, like just so many questions. And so I got in that line because all I could think of is that woman, like, we need to get this message out here. She needs a book. And I got to her and I said, you need a book and I can help you do it. And she said, cool, let's do it. Like literally that's how it happened. And
That's amazing.
Before you know it, I was flying out to her place in NorCal and we were, running experiments and she was showing me her work. And that's where it started. That all started after, that summit, which was about 2012. And then the book came out in 2016.
So that was Roar. That was the first book that you did with her?
Yep. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, again, as you can tell, I'm a big fan of what you're doing, and I'm so glad you gave us some time today. This has just been awesome, and I thank you for the work that you're doing and for joining us here today. This has been terrific.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Please check back next Monday for a new episode featuring marketing conversations through the lens of influence. I am your host, Danielle Wiley, and this is The Art of Sway.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Colin Jeffries and Eric Reed host a great podcast called the Rethink Marketing Podcast. Colin, tell us what these fine folks will get out of listening.
Well, Jason, on the Rethink Marketing Podcast, we unpack the myths, misconceptions, and flat-out lies of marketing and sales. Our listeners tell us that we help bring different perspectives to common business growth, wisdom, and advice.
That's great. Where can people subscribe?
They can subscribe at rethinkmarketingpodcast.com or listen on their favorite podcast platform, including marketingpodcasts.net.
You heard him. Go subscribe.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.